Hi gang, so yeah, squats are back. And loads of people then went online to go, Ian, what did you think about the fact that squats are back? Because you talk about squats a lot, and yeah, I'm really excited is what I think. That's what I think. So I'm in a box because I was setting up this OBS thing so that I could try and do some video game streaming, and so maybe doing a reaction to the squats and maybe filling a little bit of info is a good way to test that out. So that's what I'm going to do in this video. I'm just going to record this all as one stream. I'm going to go through the articles, see what it says, have a look at the model, and maybe also give my reaction thoughts, maybe fill in a little bit of detail, because if you don't know a lot about the squats from back in the 80s and 90s, there's actually a fair amount in this article that references that old fluff in ways you might find surprising. So that's what we're going to do. Enjoy. Hey everybody, so yes, brilliant, here we go. So here's the article that came out yesterday. I'm recording this on the 3rd of April. This is from Saturday, and it's a response to their apparent April Fool's joke, which wasn't really an April Fool's joke. I think when the April Fool's thing came out, everyone assumed that the squats were coming back for maybe Kill Team or something like that. But apparently no, whole new faction with a little release video. So if you don't know, the squats were one of the early factions in Warhammer 40k. When Warhammer 40k was originally written, they were, it was very much a port of Warhammer Fantasy over to a sci-fi setting. So you had space elves like the Eldar, and you obviously had space orcs like the space orcs we still have. And you had squats, which were space dwarves and had a terrible name. They had a very distinct look, I guess you'd say. They had, you know, flak jackets, beards, but also normal dwarf things, but also like this comedy space biker thing, which never really stuck. And then in the mid-90s, Games Workshop got rid of them. They were removed from the game permanently. They were never going to be brought back. That's where we get the term squatted for new factions. And so their return after almost 30 years is quite a big deal for a lot of people. So let's have a look at this first thing. Obviously, everyone thought it was a April Fool's, but it isn't an April Fool's. They've released this little video, which I'll just play here, set in as someone boards an Imperial spaceship. If you watch the whole video, it's an April Fool's version of the Imperial spaceship, which makes sense given how they've treated squats since the 90s.
What? You thought we were joking?
Go. So yeah, they thought we were joking. Blah blah blah. Here he is. One squat track. This is all we've seen so far. This single lone trooper. I just want to direct your attention, all internet pundits, to a bit of this. A lot of people were talking about how squats should be squattish because that's what dwarves are in Lord of the Rings. So let's just turn this all the way up and make sure we can definitely hear the accent here, which is.
What? You thought we were joking?
Yeah, that's not Scottish. That's not Scottish. That's an Eastern European, maybe even Russian accent. Not sure. And that will become relevant a bit later. Let's keep on going down. We've got our first squat model. So I'll talk a bit about the model and the model design and where that comes into the rest of the squat world and the rest of the 40k world, and then we'll jump into what it gives us, the little bits it gives us about the background. So here's our one guy, apparently a normal trooper. Obviously, as soon as this came out, half the Twitterverse started yelling about how they're completely wrong and not grimdark enough and not correct and not what they want, and, you know, the usual rubbish that comes out the minute Games Workshop do anything nowadays. Big conversation was actually about proportions, and people were worried that these are just way too big. But very much depended on what this base size is here. Interestingly, if you look at something like Caradron Overlords, they're not that different in size. These are the regular Caradron Archanaut company, probably the closest thing Games Workshop currently do to squat models. Certainly the closest thing to like jumpsuit, environment suited dwarves, and there's not, if you assume those base sizes are the same, that's not a massive difference. That's not, I don't think that's too weird. And yeah, I mean, Arcanauts, Caradron are a bit bigger than old dwarves used to be, but they're not ridiculously so. They look in proportion. So I'm tentatively optimistic about these proportions. I think that will be a 25mm base. I don't think the squats are going to come on 32s. I guess it could be 28 like the sisters, but yeah, I think this is pretty good. They're obviously though quite a different aesthetic to old squats. So if we look at the old squat models, here we go. Yeah, they had this like very deliberate visor, sort of classic sci-fi mixed with biker trucker caps and biker things looks. This is your classic Brotherhood squat that you think of with like his almost Star Wars like bobbly helmet, flak jacket, and obviously this is very different. It's much more, I guess you'd call it like modern generic sci-fi, and that disappointed a few people. I think one of the actual big differences here is that they're very different, not only to a lot of other Imperial stuff in 40k, but they're very different to the one squat model that they have. Well, actually, there's two squat models that they have released in Necromunda. This is Grendel Grendelson from Necromunda, who is proportionally about the size of a Caradron Overlord. That's him on a 25mm base. And obviously an updated version of the very, very old Space Dwarf models. That makes sense. And I think a lot of the worry is that this guy looks totally different to that. Which, yeah, I mean, I'm a little disappointed by that. I would have liked them to have more of the old design cues in there, but evidently they're going down a different route. I would imagine one of the things they're trying to do with a lot of their different factions is really differentiate them. You can see that in things like Death Guard and Thousand Suns, how Death Guard not only look quite different to a normal Space Marine now, but also have a whole range of vehicles that are their own. With the idea obviously being that each faction has a very unique look. So I could see them, I could see them deliberately making squats different this time around. Also, they got rid of them because they were too dwarfy, and yeah, I mean, like, Grendel looks like a dwarf. Look at this braided beard and everything like that, and the little dwarf pendant there. One of the main reasons to get rid of squats originally is cited as them just being too obviously a fantasy race in space. These guys look, yeah, different from that. Interestingly, though, a lot of other people have done dwarves in space in the last 20 years, and this has some similar design cues to some of those. The first thing I thought when I saw this weapon particularly was these are Hassle-Free Grim, which are like very small, almost halfling-sized space dwarves. And yeah, there's a lot of design cues here, that sort of like form-fitting armor, smooth armor, and the sort of vents on the side of the weapons. That was the first thing I thought about. I'm not a huge fan of that generic sci-fi design. Actually, one of the first things it reminded me of, and this is a out of production reference, is these guys, which are AT-43 Carmans from Rackham Games, which are like huge gorilla blokes. And maybe it's the colours, maybe it's the sort of egg shape, but I thought those were quite similar. But yeah, those were the first thing that came to mind. We had a lot of people yelling about how they look like Tau, or they look quite Towy, and then complaining that they don't look 40k enough, which is actually a criticism Tau faced when they were introduced to the game in 2000 and, I'm going to say 2004, maybe 2003. Everyone complained that they weren't 40k enough. Of course, over time that all beds in and 40k changes, which is what it's always done. I can see the point here. A lot of this Tau stuff has the same little vertical vents as their guns. It has that inlaid circuitry look, which I think people associate quite a lot with Tau weaponry. So yeah, I can see why people might think that. But actually, when you look at this, I think there's actually a bit more proper design philosophy going on here. One of the things about the squats is that they're meant to be an old variant of humanity from the Dark Age of technology, before the Age of Strife, that sort of went off and did its own thing and evolved in a different way. And when you look at similar things in 40k, in the 40k universe at the minute, that kind of makes sense. This is the current Van Saar range, and one of the big criticisms of the Van Saar range is that they look way too sci-fi and technologically advanced for a 40k environment, certainly for the Necromunda environment. They used to look a lot simpler than this. But when you start looking at all the design cues here, there's a lot of similarities. Like the vents on the weapons are not the same, but not dissimilar to what the squats have. Also, these little sort of striped shoulder pads, which are originally from the Vansar. They're from the Vansar kit, originally from the Arbiters design, originally from the old Vansar designs in the 90s. You can see them showing up here as well. There's like things like the little back of his gauntlet here. So the Vansar are quite similar, which makes a lot of sense, because the reason the Vansar look so technologically advanced nowadays is because they're meant to get all their technology from an ancient pre-Age of Strife STC system, which gives them like prohibited technology from that the rest of the Imperium don't have access to. And of course, that's the same as what the squats have. So there is there's a similarity there. It's a consistent design aesthetic. I guess I like the idea that before the Dark Age of or in the Dark Age of technology, before the Age of Strife, the Imperium's tech looked like every other generic sci-fi franchise, the generic cyberpunk sci-fi franchise, and 40k is just what you get when it all collapses. I like that idea. So yeah, there is a design philosophy here that's quite consistent. Also, I should say that like when you look at, I think the things like the canister here look a lot like Tau technology, but then when you compare them to something like, a Primaris Hellblaster, they're not too dissimilar. And of course, Primaris are meant to be using very advanced versions of power armor technology developed over the last 10,000 years, that is developed from STCs that predate what the rest of the Imperium has. So look, I think this is a very different look from the old squats. I think that was to be expected. I don't think it's particularly weird. This guy looks a bit bland, but look at the basic Arcanauts. There's these are not the most detailed version of Kharadron Overlords, so I'm expecting this guy to be one of the lesser detailed versions. Also, there are some obvious human things in there that Tau wouldn't have, like all these pouches around here. Excuse me. The little grenades. So I think they fit. I think they can be made to fit. One of the things I did like about squats, though, is in the old squat background, of course, they did have things like Imperial weaponry. They had drove rhinos and land raiders around. I don't think we'll be seeing that. I think these guys will have some new variant of vehicle technology. There is precedent already in 40k for vehicles that predate the Imperium or predate about the year 30,000 looking significantly different. This is a Heresy Custodes Caladius Grav tank, and one of the big things about the Custodes and Heresy is that they have access to technology that doesn't come from the Forge World Mars Mechanicum tradition. So their technology looks very different, and it's very sleek, and it's grav technology, because this is the last remnants of the best technology Terra used to have before the Dark Age, before the Age of Strife. So there is a precedent here for all the stuff that currently exists in 40k, all your regular, rhinos and land raiders and that blocky square thing being deliberately Martian, and the Terran stuff originally looked really, really, really different. So, I mean, there is precedent there for all the squat stuff to look really, really different. But yeah, that's what they are. That's what we've seen. I think the haircut is, whatever. It's very now. I think that's going to date quite quickly. But yeah, I like them. They're fine. They're great. I think I would like to see some more of the old Grendel aesthetic put in there somewhere. I think that'd be nice. But yeah, I see where they're going with it. Let's get on to the background. So, although their civilization shares common roots with humanity, the Leagues of Votann. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. They're called the Leagues of Votann. We'll get onto that. The idea that there are these leagues is actually one of the things that's from the old squat fluff. The idea that Squats used to be arranged into strongholds and brotherhoods. Brotherhoods would exist within a stronghold. The stronghold was buried into a mountain on a planet and would do trade. And the squats, brotherhoods, and strongholds would arrange themselves into leagues to trade and to create trading blocks, which is based on medieval leagues. The Hanseatic League, I imagine, is one of the prime examples of that. So this idea that they're called the League of Votann, that's that's a thing that used to be in the squat fluff. That works. Votann is a weird choice. I'll get to that in a bit. But yeah, that's fine. So they're formed into leagues. They are parts a sort of divergent strain of humanity that developed on its own in the old fluff. They were near the galactic core, which apparently explained high gravity. That's not really how gravity works, but fine. They have a knack for science and a headstrong nature, skilled warriors backed up by reliable weaponry. And while there's no love lost between the leagues of Votann and humankind, the resurgence of chaos means there are usually more pressing concerns than fighting each other. So loads of interesting things here. That was basically what the squats were in the 80s. They were sort of nominal, a bit like the Mechanicum, nominally part of the Imperium, but not really part of the Imperium. So the squats would be, there were allies of convenience. They shared a bit of technology, obviously. In the original squat thing, they shared quite a lot of technology, and you could put things like Imperial commissars in there if you wanted, but they had their own technological secrets. They had their own traditions. And they would also fight with the Imperium. Originally, in the background, the Badab sector, where the Badab War is from, was the Marine chapters that guarded it were put there to form a bulwark against a possible squat invasion of the Imperium. So that's a thing that used to be in the fluff. So this kind of sounds, it sounds like the squats. The guy here is in a spaceship, like in the opening thing, and is dressed in some sort of void armor. Looks a bit like Gene Stealer cult armor I've heard, which makes sense because, mining suits, exosuits. The clip down there, I like the carabiner. That's quite a good thing. That implies, like the Arkanauts, some sort of void mining or space mining. And that ties in a bit to what the squats were in between losing them in the mid-90s and now. There was this, for a small period of time, there was a species called the Demiurge, in Battlefleet Gothic that were part of Tau fleets, and the idea that they were short, stocky asteroid miners and salvage merchants existed, and everyone thought for a while that was how the squats would go. Nothing was ever really made of it, but yeah, that means that I can totally see that this is maybe some development of that concept. So yeah, in a lot of ways these are very similar, more similar than you'd think to the old squat fluff. A little bit about how this might be developing though. I made a video about a month ago about how 40k could potentially shed a bit of its image as its unfounded image, but something that's a problem in the community. Its image with being a bit of a right-wing loving setting. Of course it isn't. It's meant to be a satire, but the satire's all gone, so there's an awful lot of people in it who really, really like their Black Templars, maybe for the wrong reasons. Anyway, we've all heard about them. They turn up they make terrible YouTube channels, interview awful people, and then turn up at tournaments. And one of my suggestions to stop that was to introduce more factions in the Imperium, particularly human factions from beyond the Cicatrix Maledictum, that would give an alternative to the Imperium, so that the Imperium can still exist, but the idea that the Imperium is right and the only way can be removed from the setting. And yeah, this would kind of do that. So that's interesting. This would give you a humanoid, maybe human-like faction, which are possibly not as horrible, or maybe not horrible in the same way as the Imperium, diversifying the sort of options for your human factions. I don't know if they still count as human. They said they're a branch of them. But yeah, so I think that's a really, really good thing. Although I do think the Leagues of Votann is a really weird choice. Given that Warhammer are very aware that it has a extremely small vocal minority of arseholes in the community that like to big up the fascist tendencies of the Imperium. Choosing to call it Votann, like, if you didn't know, Votann comes from Wotan. Wotan is a Germanic, it's basically the old German form of Odin, the Norse god, from when that was a lot more widespread in Scandinavia. It comes up in a lot of old German folklore. It comes up in newest German folklore because Wagner used it for his Ring Cycle. And that sort of imagery, that sort of Odin Wotan imagery, is exactly the imagery that a lot of white nationalists like to conjure up. So it feels weird that after releasing that's the word you choose. Like, of all the different things you can choose, choosing that, it's just a bit of an own goal, isn't it? Squat leagues. There are other squat leagues. There was the League of Emberg, the League of Capellan, the League of Thor, which maybe isn't much better. Anyway, it just seems like a bit of a. It just seems like someone didn't really think that through. Maybe it's an irrelevance. Maybe it doesn't matter. But given Games Workshop's Games Workshops need to take public stances against this thing a couple of times in the last year. Seems a bit silly, doesn't it? Anyway, whatever. Mine are definitely going to be cut from the League of Capellan or the League of Emberg or something, and I'll see how I can incorporate that, I guess. So yeah, look, there's not a lot to go on yet. We know a little bit about them. We know that their backstory is going to be different, but not that different from what the old squats were. We know that their visual design is very different, but again, not too dissimilar to what 40k's been doing recently. And yeah, that's about it. I'm excited. I'll be getting some. It's interesting because I've been building this army of militia and, well, not militia and cults, that's probably what they're going to be now. This army of old squats, which I'm now going to put on hold until I know what this army does. There's an option that I would use my old metal squats with this army's rules. There's another option that I would get some of these models, maybe do some conversions, make them look a bit more like the old ones, and then take all my metal squats and turn them into a militia and cults army, because, heresy's also a thing again. So yeah, a lot to think about. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm not going to suddenly start painting metal squats again. I'm going to leave off a bit till I know what's happening with these guys, but I'm glad they're back. I'm excited. Maybe you will be too. And that's it. That's my thoughts. Let me know if this is a good format. I need to get a bit better at it. I'm looking over here because that's where all my controls are. I need to get a bit better at it, but I think this might be quite a nice thing to do as a sort of bit of info about new releases, maybe. We'll see. And I'm definitely going to use this to do some sort of old video game playthroughs. Yeah, this was fun. Let's see if it works. All right, bye.